Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in to the third episode of Hicksy and Chris on Sports. My name is Chris Asbrock, and I'm joined, as always, at least for the first two episodes, and now this one, joined by Scott Hicks. Hicks, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Chris. How are you?
Well, you know what? The fact that it just took us over 50 minutes to try and figure out what the heck was going on audio-wise, I'm not too bad right now.
So we're currently taking volunteers to be an audio engineer.
Yeah, we need a producer or something for this crap.
Yeah. Obviously
Because Google Hangouts. What?
Free of charge, of course, but.
Well, yeah. I mean, we haven't made. I don't think we've made any money on this so far. But the issue is, I mean, there's no. I don't know. It's Google Hangouts. I don't know what the heck their problem is. I've never had it so far. I mean, once we kind of figured out, we were shooting blindly the first time, but then last week's episode was good. We did a good job with it. Figured it out. This week, gong show. So fantastic.
Well, that's a good way to start.
Exactly. Well, speaking of good ways to start, let's jump into that Bengals game from Monday night.
We have to.
Well, we don't have to. We can kind of quickly go over it because I'm not gonna lie.
Just past that nightmare that took place on Monday night because it still gives me bad dreams.
Dude, that was. Oh, imagine being down there. It was ugly.
I'm glad I didn't waste the money or time.
Well, yeah, it was bad. I mean, luckily we were at the. My dad and I went down. We went to the Holy Grail for a few hours and hung out there, and then
should have stayed there.
Well, I know we should have. Well, we took a quick cat nap after that, and we went back to the car and did a nice quick cat nap, and we were raring to go. But man, I wasn't expecting that crap.
Well, at least somebody was raring to go because the football teams didn't show up, either of them.
No, they did not. I mean, we all knew that they weren't going to go 16-0. I mean, let's be honest with that. But you can't lose at home on Monday Night Football to a team that's, granted, they were 3-5. Or they were 3-5, but granted, they do have something to play for. So they're not. They got a lot to play for. They're still playing for the division. So, I mean, but still, you can't lose that game at home, though.
Well, no, you can't. Especially when all you talk about the last couple weeks is how they were talking about going 16-0. So while you can say that no one expected it, they expected it of themselves. So if you expect it of yourself, you can't come out and perform that way. And you can't blame it just on one person. I mean, we saw a little bit of bad Andy on Monday night, and that's somewhat concerning. And we've obviously their record in primetime has been well documented, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. But that looked like the Bengals team that shows up normally in primetime. The lights and the stage seemed too big for them, and their big playmakers didn't make any plays. And offensively, I thought Hugh Jackson got too cute. I mean, you're throwing out wrinkles where you have your left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, for the first series. He lined up more at wideout than he did at tackle. You're trying to outthink everybody. You're trying to Belichick everybody else. Be yourself. Don't overdo it. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't try to get too cute. Play football. And I thought they got away from their game plan too much.
I would totally agree, and I got a couple things I want to kind of go off of that. Do you think the bye week kind of hurt? Where are you going, man?
My battery's about to die.
Oh yeah, well yeah, we can't have a repeat of that. That was that was interesting last time. But kind of going off of that, do you think that extra time? Do you think that kind of hurt them more? Because like you said, it wasn't just on Andy. It was an entire team effort that was just ridiculous. And I'm going to touch on that here in a little bit. But do you think that the time off, you think it hurt him?
No, I mean it shouldn't.
Yeah, but sometimes you get out of your rhythm though when you come off of a big victory like they had against the Browns. But then you have that little extra time, and it just, I mean, that's what I was kind of wondering. It kind of seemed like they were like, I know I was tweeting it out at the game because it just had that feeling. Like, you could tell. And we were all looking at each other at the stadium. We're all like, man, they just seem off. Like, nothing seemed just to go right. And they just did not look – they weren't crisp at all, obviously. But,
well, you can – it was somewhat – watching the pregame, I know you're out of the stadium, but you watched the pregame show and good Lord, their butts were kissed no other. I mean, everybody was talking about every single analyst picked the Bengals to win. And it almost felt like we've had these moments as Cincinnati sports fans where your team finally gets to a point where they are talked about all the time, become a focal point, and they inevitably always lay an egg. And that's what happened. And it was one of those moments before the game where you saw all this press, everyone saying they're the most complete team, they're the best team, they're almost up there with the Patriots, this and that. And it was almost felt like, oh, crap, here we go. I mean, it was. It's one of those where you felt like the Bengals really slid under the radar for the first 7 weeks. And then now all of a sudden everyone's paying attention, and then they do that. And
yeah.
I don't think at this point in the year you need the rest. Rest shouldn't be a bad thing. And I just think they spent the last 10 days reading about how great they were.
Yeah.
And they got it in their heads. I don't know how the week of practice went, but obviously it wasn't their best because they came out and played far less than their best.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, obviously, well, it's been documented, I do support Andy Dalton. I know that you are not as much. But I noticed, and I don't know if they mentioned this on the game because I deleted the DVR video of the game because I was not going to watch it again. I already put myself through hell once being there. I didn't want to watch it again on TV.
No, you don't want to.
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to. But one thing that I noticed was, and you could tell, and I don't know if it was Andy making these adjustments or if it was Hugh Jackson, but J.J. Watt was an absolute holy terror. He was eating Eric Winston alive. And I noticed that every time, and we a bunch of us noticed it, around us in the stadium, that as soon as Andy would drop back, he could not look right because Watt was coming right at him. So he immediately had to turn left and look that way. So they were able to shut, all that off. So that's what I was kind of wondering if they had mentioned anything about that on the broadcast because, Watt was – that's the first time I've ever seen J.J. Watt play live. And my God, dude, that guy's an absolute beast. And he was eating Eric Winston. I felt bad for him. And it was to the point to where I think that it came you have to, as Hugh Jackson, you have to, obviously you have to realize that as a coordinator, and you have to give him some help on that right side there. Put Gio in there, pick him up, help him block to give Andy some time because, there was on the last drive of the game, we noticed that, he was giving him some help. So Andy, he made a couple great throws where he was able to step up in the pocket and fire shots right down the middle. That were great throws. So I didn't see, did they mention anything like that on the broadcast or at all?
They did. And the best part was prior to the game, Trent Dilfer, with the help of a couple of LaSalle Lancers, went through a whole scheme of what the Bengals need to do to isolate J.J. Watt. And it made a lot of sense, whether it be help from the running back, a tight end chipping on him, slot receiver chipping him, running draw plays to the opposite side, running screen plays to the opposite side, make him run, make him get tired. The bad part is they didn't do that till 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So
I noticed.
And the big thing is it was clear as day J.J. Watt was in Andy Dalton's head.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Andy Dalton he looked timid. He looked unsure of himself. He looked unconfident. And J.J. Watt was in his head. And that's on Dalton. As a professional quarterback, you can't if you want to be at elite level, you can't allow that to happen. But also, as an offensive coordinator, Hugh Jackson needs to understand if Trent Dilfer can identify what to do, Hugh Jackson should be able to identify what to do. And exactly. you gotta line Tyler Eifert or Hewitt. One of them should have been lined up next to Eric Winston every time. Gio or Jeremy Hill should have been on the right side of Andy Dalton every time. And if J.J. Watt wants to start rotating around, you can move your running back to either side. But you got to get somebody to chip on him because you left Eric Winston on an island. And Eric Winston, the guy actually – I mean, J.J. Watt had 1 sack. So it's he kind of flushed the pocket a little bit. But Eric Winston did a pretty good job. I think he only had 1 holding call against him. So it's not like, Eric Winston was a complete disaster, but help the guy out against the best pass rusher in the league. You can't just leave the guy on an island who's not even your starting right tackle, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And you gave him no help. And clearly, it should have been recognized that Andy Dalton was worried about him.
Exactly. And see, that's the thing. And that's where, I know exactly what you're saying about how Andy Dalton as a professional, he has to be a elite quarterback. You can't be worried about that kind of stuff. But if you notice that your quarterback is like that, that's where the onus falls on Hugh Jackson to get that set up to where you can help him out. Granted, like you said, it's not that Winston was a disaster because he did an okay job, but it was more of the pressure that had Dalton flustered because he was constantly, as soon as he would be back, Watt was right there. And it was like, so mentally, yeah.
You say that, but watching the game, Chris, it really wasn't, watching it did not look like that.
Oh, so
I'm telling you, Andy Dalton had more time than you're giving him credit for. He was he was trying to do too much, and he got frantic because he felt like J.J. Watt was on him constantly, but he had more time than he gave himself credit for. And he scrambled nicely early on because he felt pressure. But to me, when I saw him do that early in the game, I knew I could sense right away he was uncomfortable. That's not typical Andy Dalton. Yeah. Andy Dalton typically doesn't rush like that. He doesn't leave the pocket that much. He doesn't scramble. He goes through his progression, but he was not going through his progression because he was worried about J.J. Watt. It almost seems like he did not trust Eric Winston to get the job done.
That's interesting, though, is that you're saying that, like on the broadcast, it didn't show. I'm telling you what, in the stadium, everyone around me was saying the same thing. That like in real time looking at it, it painted a completely different picture than what the broadcast did. That's interesting. And I kind of wish I didn't go back and delete that DVR. I didn't want to put myself through it again, but that's interesting though that it showed different than what, like I said, than what it did in the stadium. So because it was completely different. You could just kind of tell that the way the game started. Very first play, my God, you got a penalty already. And I'm like, this isn't a good start. But then, that drive wasn't too bad. They ended up stalling, but, it just wasn't good. It just was not – it was an ugly game, absolutely ugly game. But, there was just – it just was ugly overall offensively. The defense didn't do a bad job. Honestly, they didn't. Let's be honest, it wasn't that bad defensively. They did some good things, but offensively, the offense let this team down. Special teams didn't help it. Or Kevin Huber.
Anytime in the NFL you give up 10 points, you should win.
Well, no doubt, yeah. And honestly,
seriously, let's digress for a second. How many flipping times is TJ Yates going to beat this stinking football team?
You know what? We make him look like Tom Brady. It's actually. When they brought him in, I was like, oh, crap. That's the first thing I said was, oh, man, this is not going to go well.
Well, until he made that first pass and he short-hopped it 5 feet in front of the wide receiver. Well, I felt good at that point. But then he got comfortable. He's 3-0. He has more playoffs wins than Andy Dalton.
I know. It's crazy.
The guy was on a couch 3 weeks ago, and he comes in and throws a touchdown pass to win the game.
Okay, now let's be honest. How sick of it that catch by DeAndre Hopkins, that was in our end zone. That was coming right at me.
Well, it was a tremendous catch, but
dude, that was filthy. That was just what a great play. I got to give him credit for that one. That was awesome. Well done. I even stood up and I was like, I got to clap that because that was. What a catch.
That's the difference when we talk about. I know we're kind of digressing off topics here, but DeAndre Hopkins showed you what an elite wide receiver is. I'm telling you. People want to keep putting A.J. Green in the top 5. An elite wide receiver doesn't fumble the ball on the 23-yard line when their team's driving. an elite wide receiver like DeAndre Hopkins did in the second half makes themselves available and goes up and makes plays. And A.J. Green was absent on Monday night.
Yeah.
I mean, you could barely tell he was even there.
He does.
And that's not an elite wide receiver. He's got to step up and make plays. And he just did not look into it. And, there's a couple – I mean, he's going up against a rookie defensive back. He should have ate him alive, Chris. He should have ate him alive. And they either weren't comfortable or I don't know what their problem was, but elite wide receivers make elite plays when it matters, when your team needs them, and A.J. Green didn't.
And elite wide receivers fight hard for a ball. Because that's my biggest criticism with him is he's late. It's not that he's lazy, but he is lazy when it comes to, some of these interceptions that Dalton will throw that if AJ puts a little bit of effort into it and fights for it, it won't be an interception. That's the thing. That's where the elite part, that you can't call him elite based off of that. I give you that.
You can't
frustrating.
There. Your team, somehow they had a chance to win that game. Miraculously.
Oh, I know.
They had a chance, and you fumble. He's done that on more than a half dozen occasions. And, Dalton should have been picked earlier in that drive. The 30 jumped that route, and A.J. Green didn't even fight for the ball. Those are the types of things. And he jumped that route because they threw a quick out on the first play of that drive, and he got beat. So the next time they did it, they should have known a rookie wide receiver would jump that. It should have been a double move. You stop and go there. That kid is burnt, and AJ has a chance to take it to the house. But AJ, instead of recognizing that, sat on the route, and he got jumped, and it should have been picked.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was frustrating. Then, Tyler Eifert with all those drops,
listen, you can't put this loss all on Andy Dalton. I'm not going to. Eifert clearly peed down his pants most of that game. And the running game was non-existent. And Andy started feeling pressure and tried to start forcing things and trying to do too much like he's been known to do in the past. But he started doing that because his quote-unquote skill players weren't being skillful.
That's very true because, like you said, it's not all on Andy Dalton. This was an entire team effort that stunk the joint up. But, it was. And that's the problem when you have a quarterback like that. Regardless, it's all quarterbacks that'll do that. When your skill players aren't doing it for you, they go out and try and win the game. Some can do it. The majority of them can't. Let's just be honest. There's only a handful of guys in that situation that would have won. They would have won that game for him. It's just the way. Like you said, Dalton did try to do too much because he was trying to win that game. He didn't get it done. He didn't play very well. A.J. Green didn't play very well. Jeremy Hill, Jesus Christ. Jeremy Hill, if you don't start running the ball up the middle instead of dancing side to side, I'm going to go postal. God bless it. You're a big guy. Run it up the middle, man.
Well, but at the same time, you got to call plays that are going to be beneficial. You can't run off tackle to J.J. Watt's side. Let's be realistic.
Well, I understand that, but half the time
they're running A gap, they're running off tackle to J.J. Watt's side, and he's eating Eric Winston alive. You're not going to have running lanes there.
I understand that, but that's not just a this week thing.
Yeah, no, I get
this. Is Jeremy Hill all season. That's not him.
Yeah.
And then, Eifert obviously was. He had a rough game.
We can clearly get rid of the Gronk comparison now because you look what Gronk did when the Patriots were down against the Giants on Sunday, and you look what Eifert did when the Bengals were down on Monday, and they're completely different outcomes.
Yeah, Gronk. That's.
Gronk was Brady's go-to guy when they needed it, and Gronk made the plays. If Eifert makes a couple of those catches, it makes Dalton look a lot better. We're probably having a different conversation today.
Yeah. There was one third down where the defender fell down. Andy just did not adjust well and threw a bad pass to Eifert on that wide open third down.
Yep.
That's obviously that's on Andy, but it was just that was the night right there. You know, like that play summed it all up.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, but
it was frustrating. And kind of the difference between last Thursday and Monday, we talked about the halftime adjustments and how the Bengals last Thursday against the Browns made terrific halftime adjustments and shut the Browns down in the second half. It was the opposite this week. You know, Bill O'Brien outcoached Marvin Lewis, and that's something that's concerning. That's something that's been brought up in the playoffs, especially. Marvin Lewis has a tendency sometimes to get outcoached, and the adjustments that the Texans made at the half were extremely beneficial, and they stymied the Bengals in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, that was. It's frustrating when you see that. I mean, when you see it, and like I said, it is what it is.
I mean, I think they deserve a pass for the week. You know, it's one. They laid one egg. They're 8-1. The concern is you go to Arizona now. You lay another egg. You start looking over your shoulder a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I believe I mentioned the last episode that we did is I predicted the Bengals to obviously win this game like every normal human being outside of a Texans fan. I predicted them to lose going, in Arizona. Because right now, we're 8-1 right now. 8-1, second, in the conference. Hey, still sitting pretty. If they go to Arizona and play a good football game but lose, I'm cool with that. It's just, those things happen. And you play just week, then that's where it's going to be kind of a problem because, there's no excuse for that 2 weeks in a row. This isn't the Cleveland Browns here. This is the 8-1 who are easily one of the better teams in football. So not afford to go out in Arizona on Sunday night and lay an egg like they did.
No, they can't. But what I mean is, they have a 3-game lead on Pittsburgh right now. Pittsburgh goes to Seattle this weekend. So obviously, we all become pretty big Seahawks fans. But if Pittsburgh loses, it kind of, they have the Colts after that, which I wouldn't anticipate that being a tough matchup. But, you had a chance this week to keep a 2-game lead on that number 2 seed. And I think, and we've talked before, that bye in the first round is big. And that's something that this team needs. Right now the Denver's trending downwards.
Yeah.
But you have a game lead on them. They're without the starting quarterback. It's a mess at quarterback for an offense for them. But Pittsburgh's only 3 behind you. And you lose this week and they find a way to win at Seattle. You have them at home in 2 weeks. That game in 2 weeks could be for the lead in the division. And that's a concern.
That's a percent with you on that. Honestly, what's kind of frustrating is a lot of it on social media is Bengals immediately after this loss, it was sales. This, the season's over, and it's like, okay. I mean, even the national media, some of the pundits on ESPN said the same thing. My God, does this season not? I mean, yeah, I agree. They get a pass for this week. It's going to happen. You're not going to go out there and you're not going to be sharp every time. Unfortunately, it happened on prime time. If this happened on a normal 1:00 game, it wouldn't be an issue. It's just, I mean, I just think that, everyone just needs to take the pump the brakes on the blasting of this team because, my God, it's not that bad. 8 still. If they go to Arizona and so is this Bengals team and win that game, no problem. But it's just going to come down to, they have to execute.
I think the concern is the confidence of the offense. Because if you go into Arizona against a defense that's probably playing better than anybody else, and you lay another egg, they got the Rams after that. And I'll tell you what, St. Louis isn't no
Rams
spot.
aren't easy, man.
They went into Arizona, beat Arizona. They got one of the best defenses in the NFC, and they got one of the best running backs in the league. So all of a sudden, you go in at laying 2 eggs, and you have a home game against the Rams, a pretty good defense, and it starts getting dicey. And that's what I mean, where you can lose 3 in a row here, and then you're at Cleveland. And if you lose 3 in a row, now all of a sudden you bring Pittsburgh back into it. You have a chance if you can win the next 3 weeks. You could go into that Pittsburgh game 11-1, and Pittsburgh probably 7-5, and you have a 4-game lead going the last 4 weeks, and you have an opportunity at home with Pittsburgh to clinch the division. That's huge. I think we lost Chris here. Chris, are you there? So I think we lost Chris, but kind of to build on my point, the schedule doesn't. It kind of shapes up with the Bengals here, where if you can get by Arizona this week, the opportunity ahead of them is pretty big, and you want to keep this gap against Pittsburgh. I think for Cincinnati's sake, the Steelers are playing with a lot of confidence right now, and they have one of the best passing attacks when Ben's healthy. If they can go into that Steelers week with a 3-game cushion, I think it's an opportunity for the Bengals to really put their foot to the gas and end the division race then, and you have 3 weeks to kind of gear up for the playoffs. So I think that's the opportunity that's ahead of the Bengals, and I think internally they're probably talking about that, and I think they need to be able to put this week behind them, understand that it's tough to go undefeated in this league, and you don't want 1 week to derail a whole season. Understand that they've been playing at an elite level all year, and you want to be able to try to get back to that this week, and hopefully they can correct some of the mistakes they made, and kind of build on things. But you back, Chris?
What's that?
Are you back? I think we lost him again. But kind of going through the schedule, you have at the Cardinals this week, another big primetime game for the Bengals, and it kind of can give them an opportunity 1 week later to bounce back. It's a short week, but to prove that they can play in primetime and play in big situations, like a playoff atmosphere. I mean, this is a big opportunity for the Bengals. They're going to be playing a lot of guys that they drafted at one point. You'll have Frosty Rucker there. You have Carson Palmer, as well as Jermaine Gresham, all playing in Arizona together. So it's an opportunity where there's going to be some guys that want revenge, and Carson Palmer wants to beat the Bengals. There's no doubt about that. So the Bengals got to play with the chip on the shoulder, play with a little edge, and we could, there's talk on ESPN.com right now about a preview of Super Bowl 50 this weekend on Sunday night. But looking at the schedule, you have the Rams after that next week at home, which it's a big game. Then you go to the Browns, and Johnny Manziel named the starter for the rest of the year. He has the capability to put some magic together. Whether he will be able to at that point, we'll find out. But that Steelers game on December 13th is a good opportunity that might be flexed into Sunday night. And as we talked last week, the 49ers game was supposed to be on Sunday night. We highly doubt that will stay there. But then you have a Monday night game at Denver on January 28th, December 28th. And that you never know if Peyton's going to be back or not. And so, in reality, that could be a game for the number 2 seed or the number 1 seed. You don't know what's going to happen with the Patriots with Edelman going down and their injury situation. But the schedule's shaping up where you got some pretty tough matchups down the stretch here, and some big games that are going to be under the lights and should be able to prepare you for the playoffs. I think we have Chris back now. Chris, are you there?
A little bit, yes. I kind of this is you have a chance to really do something and make your self-esteem. It's not so good, but it's crucial though. You have to you go out there and get it done. I mean, you never you've given a 10 the last weeks, and you want that. So, unfortunately, you're not going to get the point. Like I said, it is what, but sounds like we may be having some audio issues here with this. Scott, can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay. I don't know what was going on. This has been really weird. It's been like this of a time. I don't know. We never had this issue, and I'd never have in any other situation. I originally my video wasn't working, and audio, God only knows. This is just
well, I tried to hold the fort down like you did the other night, and hopefully I did a decent job. I don't know if you can hear me at all, but there might be 20 minutes of dead air. We don't know.
And maybe all I know is it cut out and it said like some authentication issue, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And next thing I know, it pops back up with the Steelers, and I'm like, I must have missed something there, man. Luckily, it's out of line. I mean, do you have anything else to really add? I mean, just about the Bengals, or want to move on? Or
well, I do want to address this whole Andy Dalton, J.J. Watt issue. I don't know if you heard the comments. I'm sure you have. The comments by J.J. Watt and Dalton's reaction. I tell you what, Dalton's getting beat up for this, and I think it's justified. I think Andy Dalton acted extremely unprofessional and immature by his comments to what J.J. Watt said. I know we have not talked about this, but J.J. Watt's comments were about as harmless as could be, and no way during that interview was he being disrespectful to Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton just needs to grow up. And I thought the way Andy Dalton reacted in his press conference about the comments, if you haven't heard them, you can go online and look at them. But essentially, during an interview at the postgame, J.J. Watt was asked about how they game plan for the Bengals, and he made a comment that we wanted to turn the Red Rocket into a Red Riding BB gun, which is a reference to A Christmas Story. And essentially what he meant by it was we wanted to limit Andy Dalton's production. And they did. And Andy Dalton in his post-game press conference completely overreacted. And to question J.J. Watt's integrity by what he said is completely out of line in my opinion.
It was him. The issue is, and I heard Paul talking about it today, yesterday. It was because it's on the line of the 24-hour rule situation. I mean, I get where it's a bad look, and honestly, I mean, I think it comes down to the fact that, you know what, hey, you just got embarrassed on national TV. You guys played a stinker to a team that Dalton, it's his hometown team. He's 1-4 against in his career after that one. He's 1-4. So it's just bad. And then honestly, it's gotta go, you know, hey, it's what it is. We should have approached it. Instead of getting it. It's just about just not. It comes to fruition. I think what the issue is, and Bill Polian brought up was like that 24-hour rule. Like, review it after 24 hours. You know what I'm saying? Like after the emotions, because you're gonna be emotional after that. I think if they would have talked to Andy Dalton the next day, next afternoon, or whatever, that wouldn't have been an issue.
I don't think Andy Dalton heard the full comment. I'll be honest to God, I don't think Andy Dalton heard the full quote. I think he went off of what the reporter said, and the reporter didn't give him the whole quote. Because if Andy Dalton would have heard the whole quote and still reacted that way, then I would think a lot less of Andy Dalton today.
I'm totally with you. I was just going to say the same thing. I was going to get to that is he heard it secondhand. He just heard it from a reporter.
You're commenting on something you don't hear firsthand.
Well, I agree with that. Like, and that's where the media can be, that's where it can be good and bad right there.
You can't blame that on the media, Chris, because the simple answer is if you didn't hear it, the simple answer is, well, I didn't hear the comment, so I'm not going to make a comment about it. You don't want to attack somebody else's credibility or integrity when you didn't hear the full quote.
Well, all I'm saying is, like,
the media has the right to ask the question.
I get that. But, some questions, it's just, I don't think it's really anything that, like, is it that question? You need that much. That's where I'm not blaming this on the media. It's Andy Dalton. I'm not saying this on the media. That's all.
Yeah.
So, but
it just looked bad.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It made you don't look bad on a night here. It looked bad.
Exactly. Yeah, that just put the nail in the coffin. I'm 100% with you on that.
And it becomes, and the problem is, you're the sole game Monday night. Your team played like garbage, and then you make that quote. And now Tuesday, when you're already going to get hammered by every media outlet there is, you now become a laughingstock because you make those comments, and everyone scratches their head like, "Wait, you're upset over what?"
Yeah, I know. It was just, everyone yesterday on ESPN was like, "Really?
Yeah.
You're gonna get upset over that?" Like, yeah. I know. I'm with you, man. I'm 100% with you. Well, let's transition over to another story about someone, about some ridiculous.
Listen, and you know what? I don't even really want to give this much time because I think it's an absolute joke, and I think it's a joke that ESPN is covering as much as they are. That you have one anonymous – listen, you're going to write an anonymous letter to a newspaper, and you're going to start attacking somebody like that, sack up and put your name to it. And the fact that the media outlets are giving it this much attention – Mike and Mike has been talking about it for 2 days. And all I hear Mike Greenberg say is, I don't think this is a big – quit talking about it. You're giving this woman a platform that she doesn't deserve. And it's a joke. The guy celebrated. Who cares?
Okay, and by the way, nobody gives any better touchdown celebrations than Cam Newton. I'm sorry. That's awesome.
You can like celebration. You couldn't like – listen, we know about celebrations in Cincinnati. We had the king of them a couple years ago. And you know what?
We did.
Who cares? It's not like he's doing provocative moves. He's just dancing. He does a Superman thing. Oh well. And for the Titans to get upset like they did, Chris Carter said it best. Listen, I'm mad at you for not blocking. I'm mad at you for not tackling. Don't get mad at me for scoring. I'm mad that you didn't tackle. And that's what it's
exactly.
Don't get mad that the guy's dancing in your end zone. Stop him.
Exactly. If you don't like it, don't let him in the end zone. Very simple. And my favorite part of it all, real quick, before we move over, the fact that when that guy came over to him after he did his little jig in the end zone, and the guy comes up to him, and then like he's getting in Newton's face, and Newton drops it another like 3 or 4 times. I'm like, that's impossible. And I'm like, I've never been a big fan of Cam Newton. I guess I didn't like him in college. I just never was a big fan. And it's not that I don't like him.
I thought he was a cheat, and I thought his Heisman should have been stripped. I thought the national title should have been stripped. I still think to this day he got paid. But I tell you what, and sorry to cut you off, but I've changed my opinion on him. I think the guy is. He's grown up a lot, and I think he's a class act. You look at and you read a lot of the things he does off the field. He does a lot of things for a lot of people, and it's impressive.
That's what I was just – you stole my thunder on it because that's exactly what I was going to say is he's grown on me. Like, he's honestly one of my favorite players. Like, he's fun to – he's a legit quarterback. He's fun to watch. Guy makes plays. But then, you know what, and that's what I was going to – when I was bringing up the situation, I wanted to bring that part up was the fact that, you know what, if you're going to write a letter like that, maybe you should do some little research on what this guy has done. Like, she's not going to mention that part. She's not about him doing his dance in the end zone, but she's not going to mention the fact that I heard that I could have sworn I saw it that, correct me if I'm wrong, that he drove an ice cream truck to a kid's birthday party or something like that on Halloween because this kid was sick or something. It was something along those lines. He gives a football to kids after he scores touchdowns. He does that all the time, and you're going to criticize him for that? Come on, like that's my whole.
Well, you know where this conversation should have really ended, and why it should have never even got to even mainstream media. If you look at the last couple paragraphs of her letter, she says when he started doing that, I quickly directed my 9-year-old daughter. I quickly directed her attention to the cheerleaders.
Exactly.
You want to talk about provocative dancing with very little clothing on, and that's okay? Yet a guy celebrating a touchdown, and she lies in her letter saying he did pelvic thrust. I've watched it. Guy didn't pelvic thrust, but I guarantee those cheerleaders were pelvic thrusting. So you're going to tell me in the hypocrisy of you and your letter that that's okay for your 9-year-old daughter, and Cam Newton celebrating and doing a Superman dance isn't? Child, please.
With that being said, let's move over to college football.
Thank you.
And rankings has really changed. Your Buckeyes a big game there. Who's the Michigan? Let's see. I say so much, but I was going to let you go. But
well, it's interesting. I haven't heard anything of Connor Cook's status yet. I'm looking right now. But listen, he's not going to be 100%, and that's a big problem for Michigan State. Their defense is strong, but with Langford gone, they lack a true running game. And listen, they haven't played the toughest schedule at a conference. They haven't played the toughest schedule in conference outside of Michigan, and they shouldn't have won that game. So if Connor Cook's not 100%, I don't see how Michigan State's even in this game. I would expect an inspired performance from Ohio State. This is the part of the year that Ohio State's been waiting for. Right or wrong, they've sleepwalked through the beginning part of the schedule, and they sleepwalked through Saturday and beat Illinois 28-3. If they would have played, they would have beat Illinois 68-3. And so I think this is and I don't agree with it, and I'm sure that's where you're going with that, but this is the part of the schedule they've been waiting for. This is the time of the year they've been waiting for, and I would expect a stronger performance out of Ohio State this weekend.
Well, I was just going to say two things. One, Connor Cook. So, with that being said, he thinks he's 100%.
Listen. I've had shoulder injury. If his shoulder was bad enough to keep him out of last Saturday, he's not 100% in a week. I'm sorry. You can tell me all you want. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I know. He says he's going to play. It's just going to, hopefully. I wouldn't be, obviously to be a for him, but this is the game for Ohio State. Maybe look at it. Michigan always, said that. Oh, you got Michigan in 2 weeks. You just can't be that day. Is this game for us to be this close to the game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the big thing for Ohio State, and I'm having a hard time understanding you, Chris, but this is Zeke Elliott time, and he's been gearing up the last couple weeks, and they've been increasing his workload the last couple weeks, and I would expect to see less of J.T. Barrett running the ball, more of Zeke Elliott running the ball. He was not widely used in the early part of the year. And I think mainly because they wanted to save his workload for this time of year. And his carries have gone up the last few weeks. He's at 220 on the year, 1,425 yards with 16 touchdowns. But, I think you're going to see a heavy dose of Ezekiel Elliott. And this is the time of year he started shining last year. I think he had 11 carries against Virginia Tech, 27, 23, 16, 23. 21, 19 against Rutgers, but the last 2 weeks against Minnesota and Illinois, 26 and 27. So his carries, as you can see, are starting to increase. And he had 181 yards last week, and I would expect him to be over 20 yards and close to 30 carries this week. And I think he has an opportunity to establish himself as a true Heisman front runner.
Man.
So, that's what I would expect from him this week, and that's what I would expect from Ohio State this week. JT Barrett being off for a week and kind of getting back in the groove last week, I think was a good thing. I would expect him to be better this week, and I would expect Ohio State to win by double digits and gearing up for a really big matchup at the Big House in a couple weeks, which has the potential to be a pretty powerful game, depending on what happens around the country. As we saw last week with 4 top 10 teams losing, anything can happen. And Michigan State surprisingly controls their own destiny, and they have an opportunity with the win this week to kind of jump themselves back in the playoff contention. With a win at Ohio State, and then potentially Iowa again in the Big Ten championship game if they should get past Ohio State. So they still have an outside chance. They have a lot to play for as well.
Definitely. Well, I mean, it's here's the time for Ezekiel Elliott to I don't know if you heard me, because I know that I've had some issues with my technology here, but I know you mentioned he can establish himself as a legitimate Heisman candidate. With Boykin dropping out of the race, basically, you still got Fournette, who you never know. Corey Coleman still Derrick Henry, who I don't think is I had him third last week, or I believe the second or third last week in my Heisman list. But I'm going to be changing that, because looking ahead here, if Ezekiel Elliott has 2 good games coming up here against Michigan State and then Michigan, and then obviously the Big 12 or the Big Ten championship against Iowa, I think he cements himself as a Heisman Trophy winner. He's easily one of the best running backs in the country, if not the best. Obviously Fournette, I think we still got Christian McCaffrey too.
I think that loss this past weekend kind of knocked him out of the race, and same with.
I'm not saying he's a candidate, but as solid running backs go. But I think if Ezekiel Elliott, if he can get the job done here these next couple weeks, he's gonna establish himself as I think the Heisman Trophy front runner. But it's gonna come down to it's gonna come down to how well Ohio State. If they, I'm curious. I keep bringing it up. Are they going to be overlooking Michigan State? I'm not saying overlooking, but if they may be looking ahead a little bit more than expected that Michigan game, because I just think, with Harbaugh being there now, I know I'm saying this, as a Michigan fan myself, but this seems to be meaning much more now than years past. Michigan, not obviously they're not back, but they're relevant again, a lot more than they were in the Brady Hoke era, and that's where I'm kind of thinking, what, especially, and it's tough for Ohio State when you've got Michigan State back-to-back weeks, and then now you have to look at 5th-ranked Iowa team, who undefeated, who hasn't played the best schedule, but hey, they've won their games. They've won all their games, and they're going to be in the Big Ten championship. So, you got 3 tough games for Ohio State coming up, and that's why I'm kind of curious as to how the Buckeyes come out. The good thing is it is at home, under the lights. So, it's going to be a fun one to watch. But honestly, I'm not going to be watching that game at all. I'm going to be watching Baylor and Oklahoma State. So that's focused on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't see how Ohio State could look past this game. I think coming into this year, this is the game I was circled on the schedule, not Michigan next week, because the expectations for Michigan weren't high. Michigan State was ranked in the top 5 preseason. So I think this is the game that they've been pointing to all year. Where I would be concerned is next weekend. If the Ohio State comes out and bulldozes Michigan State, I would be concerned about a letdown next weekend. Ohio State had that 2 years ago, let down against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game when they had a chance to go to the national championship game. I would not be concerned about them looking past this week. I think they've been looking towards this week all year. I think this is the stretch, and Urban Meyer does a great job of keeping his guys focused. So I would not be concerned about them looking past this week to Michigan next week, because I think this has been the game that they've targeted all year. But it's interesting when you talk about the Heisman, because I think it's Derrick Henry and Ezekiel Elliott right now. I think those are your two. It's one of those two, and it's how they finish down the stretch that's going to determine it. I think they're neck and neck. I think with LSU losing the last 2 weeks, that kind of dropped Leonard Fournette out of it, and Christian McCaffrey, I think he dropped out of it as well with Stanford's loss. But you never know. I mean, you still have Coleman in there, but I think he was isolated last week. Didn't have one of his better games, and I think he may struggle further down the stretch here when they play the last 2 weeks, when as tough as their schedule is going to be. But there's others out there that I think could emerge, and Mason Rudolph at Oklahoma State. If Oklahoma State runs the table here the next 2 weeks and goes undefeated, how do you not look at him?
You know what? I know, and actually, it brings up a good point. If Oklahoma State runs the table these next 2 weeks, luckily both games are at home. However, Oklahoma is playing a lot better than than people have even given them credit for early on. But
Baker Mayfield, I think, in the discussion as well now.
I was just gonna say he's put himself in there. What about? I mean, now let's look at the playoff picture itself. Does Oklahoma State deserve a shot to be in the playoff if they go undefeated without the championship game?
Oh, they'll be in there with no doubt.
That's okay. Good. I agree.
There's no doubt that if Oklahoma State beats this gauntlet that they have coming up, that they'll jump Notre Dame.
Now, speaking of Notre Dame, Oklahoma runs the table. Oklahoma State, do they jump over Notre Dame?
I don't think so. I think you got to look at two things with that matchup. And I heard Kirk Herbstreit talk about this morning, and he talked about Oklahoma outside of Alabama is probably playing the second best of anybody in the country, and you have to start looking at how teams are playing right now. And I get that, but you also have to look at Notre Dame's only loss is by 2 points to the team currently ranked the number one in the country. Oklahoma's only loss is to a Texas team that's an embarrassment. And what Notre Dame did to that Texas team should separate the gap for me. And it's not like Notre Dame is playing like garbage. They handled a Wake team this past week. Pitt gave them a little run for the money, but they handled a ranked Temple team, beat USC, Navy, who's climbing the ranks. And Navy right now would be in a New Year's Day bowl. So I think if it came down to Notre Dame and Oklahoma, I think Notre Dame wins that head-to-head comparison. And a lot of people will be upset about it, but you got to look at the common opponent, and that's Texas. And Notre Dame beat Texas 38-3. Granted, it was week 1, but Texas beat Oklahoma pretty soundly.
No, okay, I'm gonna throw something in there. I'm just gonna toss this out there. Granted, Notre Dame week 1, that was at Notre Dame. Oklahoma's Texas game, that worried me, like a heated run. Does that mean anything? Because to me, that means something a little bit. It means something because a rivalry game, in most cases, you can throw that out the window. You can throw records out the window in a rivalry game. You know what I'm saying? You see Miami in business remotely this year. Can you hear? I was going to say, I haven't seen that. Am I coming through good?
Now you are. I get your point about a rivalry game, but it was 14-3 at the half, 17-3 midway through the third quarter, 24-10 late in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma was never in that game. So, a rivalry game or not, it should be if you're that much of a better team in a neutral field, it should be a closer game. And it never really was. And that's the problem I have with it. Since then, have they been playing well? Yeah. But they got beat by a team that's not very good.
I guess just kind of throw it in there because to me, I like a little more. I take that into account a little, but I mean, you just can't say head to head. But
I mean, we're talking about the same team that went to Iowa State and got shut out. And we're talking about the same team that a week prior, Texas at TCU, which that's a really big game. That's a really big game. And TCU beat them 50-7. Granted, that was with
I can't.
But it's I don't know. I think that would be Oklahoma's kryptonite. I think Oklahoma's big obstacle is that Texas loss and Notre Dame winning out. If Notre Dame stumbles against Stanford, then I think Oklahoma's got a really good chance. But I think if it comes down to one loss Notre Dame and a one loss Oklahoma, Notre Dame's going to get in.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know. I would agree. So I mean, it's interesting. It's going to be. I mean, this weekend is going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of big games. It's going to be. If you're a college football fan, it's going to be a fun one to watch. Plain and simple there.
Question is, Chris, could there be a 2-loss team that slips into this playoff?
I don't know. I mean, who are you thinking of?
I think there's a couple that have an opportunity.
I know. I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one. I mean, you know what? Nothing's going to surprise me if it does happen. I can't see. I don't know. I think it's going to be kind of tough to justify that, though.
There's a couple 2-loss teams hovering around the top 10.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be interesting. Like I said, these next 2 weeks are going to be. I mean, they're huge games. For everything coming up. So, I mean, it's for college football fans, this is exactly what we what we live for, and this is exactly what why we watch college football on a weekly basis.
I mean, let's just throw this out there. Say Michigan. Let's say Ohio State beats Michigan State this weekend. Michigan beats Ohio State and then beats Iowa in a Big Ten championship game. They're sitting at 12 right now.
You know what? I mean, that right there, it's, that'll be – that's 2 huge wins right there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be tough, though, because in Ohio – you look at Ohio State, I mean, man, I don't know.
I mean, you got to look at it. If Notre Dame falls to Stanford, would that win for Stanford be able to keep them ahead of Michigan if Michigan beats? I don't think it would, because that would give Michigan two top 10 wins in back-to-back weeks.
Yeah.
I think Michigan would jump Stanford. I think Michigan would jump Notre Dame in that aspect.
Yeah.
Iowa, I think they would jump Iowa. I think Florida or Alabama, one of those two would drop out because they're going to play each other in the SEC title game. So Michigan would jump them. That's 3 teams. They would jump Michigan State. That's 4 teams. They would jump Ohio State. That's 5 teams. And all of a sudden, they're at number 7.
Ooh, man.
And you still have 3 Big 12 teams ahead of them, who all could beat each other. And Oklahoma State could lose to Baylor this weekend, then beat Oklahoma, and then Baylor could lose to TCU, and then all of a sudden you have that mess. And then if that happens, you all of a sudden find Michigan number 4 in the country.
Man, I like this talk here. You keep it up. You're getting me kind of jacked up.
But you could say you could do the same thing with Stanford here. Stanford could run the table, beat Notre Dame, and they're a spot ahead of Michigan. And if all that happens in front of them, if Ohio State beats Michigan State this weekend, Stanford's going to beat Cal. They'll jump Michigan State. If Oklahoma State beats Baylor, they'll jump Baylor, and that puts them at 9. And then you have Oklahoma State. There's a possibility here if they beat Notre Dame that would get them up to 8. Florida or Alabama will drop at some point, so that gets them up to 7. And you have Oklahoma State playing each other, so that gets them to 6 because one of them are going to fall out. And if Ohio State beats Iowa, that gets them to 5. I think the possibilities are there for Stanford and Michigan State to potentially find their way up to number 4. If again, there's a lot that has to happen, but at the same time, you have a lot of teams in front of them that just physically cannot stay where they are. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State cannot stay in the top 10 because one of them is going to lose in the next year. Ohio State and Iowa and Michigan State, all 3 of them can't stay in the top 10 because 2 of them are going to lose in the next 3 weeks.
Exactly.
Florida and Alabama can't stay in the top 10 together because one of them is going to lose in the next 3 weeks. That's 3 teams right there. That gets you to 8. So I think there's a lot of possibility for some serious chaos in the next 2 weeks, and I think the chaos is brought on by adding a 14 playoff, and I think it makes it much more exciting. I think if we're talking about the old BCS system, I think this is a lot less exciting because Clemson and Alabama look like they have the opportunity to win out and play in that title game they would have in the old system. But adding the 2 extra teams, there's a lot of turmoil that can go on here in the top 12 in the next 3 weeks that could really make things interesting.
Well, you know what? Right now, and this is where we had mentioned it last week about how it should expand to an 18 playoff, because right now any of these top 8 teams could beat each other right now. That's the beauty, and especially, and then obviously when you shrink it down to 4, man, it's set up for some serious excitement, man. There could be some wrenches thrown into everyone's plans here coming up. I mean, it could take one slip up there by Alabama or something like that. Next thing you know, they got 2 losses, and they're on the outside looking in. It's going to be a lot of fun, and like I said, it's going to be interesting to see exactly what goes on in these next 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks if you want to count like the championship weekend. These next 3 weeks are crucial for some teams, and I know for the Big 12 schools, these next 2 weeks are crucial because that's all they have left.
Well, and look at it this way: there's only going to be 2 teams undefeated in the playoffs. That's all you can really. I guess there's a possibility for 3 if Ohio State wins out and Oklahoma State wins out. But the reality is there's probably only going to be 2 undefeated teams in the playoff. So there's going to be a lot of teams with similar resumes, and it's just how you determine who's deserving and who isn't. You still have Houston out there who's undefeated and sitting at 16 or 17 in the country, and they end their year with Navy. If they win out,
I know that's where I'm kind of thinking. Like, I mean, to me, 7 that's too low, man. I mean, they should be a lot higher up. I mean, they beat Memphis in a game where they roared back to win that game. Like, that's a crucial victory for that team. I mean, to me, I think they need to be up there around, easily in the top, not top 10, but they need to be hovering around that 10, 11.
Yeah, I mean, they should be ahead of 2-loss Stanford, 2-loss Michigan, 2-loss Utah, and 2-loss Florida State. In my opinion, I mean, they should be in front of those teams if you're undefeated. But they're not in a Power 5 conference. Their schedule is not what those teams' schedules are. But it's interesting to think about, and it's interesting to look at. You're gonna have probably 2 one-loss teams in the college football playoff with very similar resumes as teams that are sitting at 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I think this year it may start stretching that conversation to expanding to 8 teams down the road. So I think it's something to be to look at, and I think it's interesting to think about and kind of watch. I think there's potential for a lot of chaos in the next 2 weeks in college football, and I for one am looking forward to watching it, and hopefully the teams don't disappoint. So I think we lost Chris here, but I think that's gonna do it for us for this week. I appreciate everyone watching, and we'll be back hopefully very shortly. Thanks, guys.